When governments announce massive fines against large corporations, the headlines are often dramatic, designed to capture attention and signal action. Billions of dollars, record penalties, historic settlements, strong warnings from regulators, promises of accountability. From the outside, from the perspective of ordinary citizens watching the news, it looks like accountability in action, justice being served. A powerful institution has been caught doing something wrong, punished severely for its violations, and presumably corrected its behavior going forward. The system appears to be working. But if fines actually work the way people expect them to, if they functioned as genuine deterrents that changed institutional behavior, then the same companies wouldn't keep breaking the same rules over and over again across years and decades. Yet they do, consistently, predictably, across industries, across countries, across regulatory regimes. The reality, the uncomfortable truth that rarely makes headlines, is that fines rarely change corporate behavior in any meaningful or lasting way. Not because companies are inherently reckless or immoral by default, though individual cases certainly vary, but because fines are built into the economic structure of how large corporations operate. Once you understand how fines are actually treated inside corporate systems, once you see the mechanics rather than the public narrative, they stop looking like punishments and start looking like operating expenses, cost of doing business, line items and financial models. Large corporations do not think the way individuals do. They cannot. Their structure, their decision-making processes, their incentive systems are fundamentally different from human psychology. An individual experiences a fine as a personal loss, an attack on their resources, their freedom, their reputation. It creates immediate fear, discomfort, shame, and behavioral change. The punishment connects directly to the person who made the decision. A corporation experiences a fine as a financial event, one that is evaluated, forecasted, modeled, and managed like any other cost of operation. Legal departments assess the risk. Finance teams model potential exposure. Risk committees weigh probabilities against expected returns. Before many corporate decisions are even made, before actions are taken, the potential downside is already calculated. Legal risk is assessed in advance. Regulatory exposure is estimated. Worst-case penalties are modeled in spreadsheets. In many industries, in sectors with consistent regulatory oversight, fines are not surprises that catch companies off guard. They are known possibilities. Expected outcomes. If the expected profit from an action is higher than the expected cost of the fine, even after adjusting for probability and timing, the action remains economically rational. It makes financial sense to proceed. This is the core reason, the fundamental structural explanation, why fines fail as deterrents. The math doesn't support behavioral change. For a large corporation, a fine does not represent moral judgment. It does not carry the weight of societal disapproval in a way that changes behavior. It represents pricing, the cost of certain actions, the fee for certain strategies. In fact, many fines are remarkably small relative to the scale of the companies receiving them. When a corporation generates tens of billions or hundreds of billions in annual revenue, when profit margins span multiple industries and geographic regions, even a fine that sounds enormous in news headlines can amount to a fraction of 1% of annual earnings. It may sting temporarily. It may generate negative press coverage for a few weeks. It may require explanations to shareholders, but it doesn't threaten survival. It doesn't undermine market position. It doesn't eliminate competitive advantage. And critically, it doesn't usually affect executive compensation in meaningful ways. The institution absorbs the financial blow and continues operating largely unchanged. And because fines are usually paid by the company itself, by the corporate entity rather than by individuals, the people who actually made the decisions, the executives who approved the strategies, the managers who implemented the policies, they rarely face direct personal consequences. Executives don't go to jail for regulatory violations that result in fines. Board members aren't personally fined from their own bank accounts. Salaries are rarely clawed back retroactively. Bonuses continue. Stock options vest. In many documented cases, the same leadership team remains in place after the penalty is paid, after the headlines fade, after the regulatory cycle completes. The institution absorbs the cost and moves forward, while the individuals who made the decisions move on to their next roles, their next companies, their next strategic initiatives. This separation between decision makers and consequences is absolutely critical to understanding why fines don't work. Corporations are legal entities specifically designed to limit liability. That structure, that separation between the company and the people within it, serves important economic functions. It protects shareholders from personal ruin. It protects executives from losing their homes and savings over business decisions. It encourages risk-taking, innovation, and economic growth. But it also means punishment rarely lands where behavior originates. The consequences disconnect from the causes. When an individual breaks a law, they face personal consequences. Jail time, personal fines, loss of freedom, direct pain. When a corporation breaks a rule, the corporate entity pays, not the people inside it. This asymmetry fundamentally undermines deterrence. Another reason fines fail to change behavior is predictability and timing. Regulatory systems are slow by design. Investigations take years to complete. Evidence must be gathered. Legal proceedings must follow proper procedures. Defense strategies drag cases through courts. Appeals stretch timelines even further. By the time a fine is actually imposed, by the time the penalty becomes real and money changes hands, the executives responsible for the original decisions may no longer be in their roles. They've been promoted. They've moved to different companies. They've retired with full benefits. The market has moved on. The profit from the violation has already been booked, distributed to shareholders, and incorporated into stock prices. The competitive advantage gained from the misconduct has already been exploited. Delayed punishment is inherently weak punishment. Time dilutes accountability. The connection between action and consequence dissolves. Fines also tend to be backward-looking by their very nature. They address past behavior, past violations, past misconduct. They don't fundamentally change future incentives or remove future opportunities for similar behavior. Once the penalty is paid, once the settlement is reached, once the legal matter is resolved, the system effectively resets. The company can continue operating. The market structure remains unchanged. There is rarely any fundamental structural change that makes repeating the exact same behavior impossible. The same competitive pressures that led to the violation in the first place still exist. The same incentives to maximize profit, cut costs, expand market share, and beat competitors remain fully intact. This creates a predictable cycle where fines become routine rather than corrective. They become part of the rhythm of business rather than existential threats that force genuine change. In some industries, particularly heavily regulated ones like finance, pharmaceuticals, energy, and telecommunications, fines are so common, so routine, that they're explicitly disclosed as risk factors to investors. Annual reports, mandatory SEC filings, investor presentations often include detailed sections describing potential regulatory penalties as part of normal business operations. Legal and compliance costs are budgeted. Reserves are set aside for anticipated fines. When something is disclosed this way, when it's built into investor expectations and financial planning, it stops being a deterrent and becomes simply a known variable, a predictable cost, a line item. There's also a deeper, more structural issue that undermines the deterrent effect of fines. They don't scale proportionally to actual harm caused or profit gained. In many documented cases, the financial benefit a company gains from violating a rule, from engaging in prohibited behavior, from skirting regulations, far exceeds the eventual fine when enforcement finally arrives. This is especially true when misconduct affects large populations, massive markets, or generates compounding advantages over time. If a violation generates billions in additional revenue, establishes dominant market position, or creates lasting competitive advantages, and the eventual penalty is measured in hundreds of millions or even low billions, the incentive structure is mathematically obvious. From a purely economic standpoint, from a rational calculation of costs and benefits, paying the fine can be the correct decision, the profitable decision, the decision that maximizes shareholder value. This isn't theoretical. This pattern repeats across industries and decades. Some companies even insure against certain types of penalties and legal liabilities. They purchase specialized policies that cover regulatory fines, legal settlements, and compliance costs. Others set aside dedicated legal reserves, pools of capital specifically designated for anticipated fines and penalties. These funds are planned in advance, incorporated into financial statements, approved by boards, and disclosed to shareholders. When enforcement arrives, when fines are imposed, the financial impact is cushioned. The psychological weight, the fear, the deterrent effect is dramatically reduced or eliminated entirely. At that point, the fine has lost virtually all its emotional and behavioral impact. Public perception and political dynamics also play a significant role in how fines function within the system. Fines often serve a primarily symbolic function. They allow regulators and governments to signal action, demonstrate responsiveness to public concern, and claim accountability without fundamentally disrupting powerful industries or challenging entrenched economic interests. Announcing a record fine generates positive headlines. It satisfies public demand for justice. It allows politicians to claim they're tough on corporate misconduct. But announcing a fine is dramatically easier than restructuring entire markets, rewriting fundamental laws, imposing strict operational constraints, or challenging the concentrated economic power of major corporations. The public sees accountability in the headlines. The underlying system, the fundamental incentive structure, remains largely intact. This is why repeat offenders are so staggeringly common in corporate enforcement. The same companies, sometimes the exact same divisions within companies, violate the same rules multiple times across years or decades. The underlying incentives never change. The competitive pressures remain. The profit opportunities persist. The fine resolves the specific legal issue, closes that particular investigation, settles that individual case, but it doesn't remove the fundamental pressure to compete aggressively, grow constantly, and maximize returns. In highly competitive markets, in industries with thin margins or winner-take-all dynamics, companies that don't push boundaries, that don't test limits, that don't occasionally cross lines, they often fall behind competitors who are more willing to operate in gray areas. Over time, this creates an organizational culture where rule-bending becomes normalized, expected, managed as a business risk, and incorporated into strategic planning rather than feared as an existential threat. It's important to understand that this pattern isn't necessarily the result of individual corruption, evil executives, or fundamentally bad actors, though those certainly exist in specific cases. More often, it's the result of scale and structure. Systems designed for individuals, punishment frameworks built for human psychology, behave very differently when applied to massive organizations with legal liability protections, diversified revenue streams, global operations, and institutional decision-making processes. Punishment that feels severe, even devastating, at a human level often becomes trivial, manageable, even irrelevant at an institutional level. $1 million fine might destroy an individual's life. It's a rounding error for a corporation with billions in revenue. This is why meaningful behavioral change rarely comes from fines alone, no matter how large the numbers in the headlines appear. Real change comes from structural constraints, changes in personal liability that reach executives directly, operational restrictions that make prohibited behavior physically impossible, rules that remove the financial upside of harmful behavior entirely, making the math work differently, regulations that break up concentrated power or change market structures fundamentally. Without those deeper structural changes, fines function more like transaction costs, licensing fees, or the price of entry rather than genuine deterrents that change institutional behavior. Once you see fines through this lens, once you understand the institutional logic, headlines about record penalties start to sound fundamentally different. They're not warnings about behavior that will stop. They're confirmations of behavior that's been priced, accepted, and managed. They tell you which behaviors are quietly tolerated by the system as long as the appropriate price is eventually paid. Understanding this isn't about cynicism or giving up on accountability. It's about clarity, about seeing how systems actually function rather than how we wish they functioned. Modern economic systems respond to incentives, not intentions. They respond to structure, not rhetoric. And until penalties meaningfully alter underlying incentives, until punishment reaches decision-makers directly, large corporations will continue to treat fines as manageable costs rather than existential reasons to fundamentally change behavior. If you want to understand how institutions really work, beyond public messaging and surface-level enforcement, beyond the headlines and the press releases, this channel exists to explain those systems clearly, calmly, and completely. And if these breakdowns help you see patterns that others miss, if they change how you interpret news and understand power, subscribing gives you access to more analysis exactly like this, the kind that explains why outcomes repeat predictably, even when punishment looks severe on the surface.